Hey, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Hope everybody is doing fantastic. Welcome to my Wednesday live stream. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, you're one of my new connections. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Excited to have you here. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going to be live right here on LinkedIn, on the YouTuber, on the Facebook, on the Twitter. So I go live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, folks. Great to have you here, and feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Don't be shy. Let me just check on a few things on mine. I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself, and the stream is indeed live. So let me just confirm that. Yeah, it looks like we are live. Awesome, fantastic. Good to have everyone here, and feel free to introduce yourself in the comments, folks. Let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Represent your city. Represent your professional title or whatever, what you do and all that fun stuff, right? Let me know. Love to hear from all of you tuning in terms of all that good stuff as well. So today what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be sharing with you 8 tips to help you win that pre-screen or that initial conversation, that initial video interview that you might have with recruiters, right? Whether it's staffing agency recruiters or corporate recruiters. Let's see, we got Mehul in the house. Mehul says, hello, Dean, love the energy. Hey, I appreciate that, Mehul. Good to have you here. And thanks so much for tuning in. Feel free to keep the comments coming in, folks. Always happy to hear from you, folks. And while I'm covering today's topics, I definitely want you to share your questions, your thoughts, your comments about this initial pre-screen and interview that you're having with recruiters right now. Specifically today, we're talking about video interviews. So video pre-screens, video conversations that you have scheduled with recruiters. So definitely want to hear your thoughts. Feel free to keep putting your thoughts and your questions in the comments. Happy to answer those. Now, we got a comment here from Mohammed. Mohammed is live only on Friday 10 a.m. UAE time. Okay, awesome. Good to have you here, Mohammed. So I guess Mohammed is saying so it's 10 a.m. on Friday over there, Mohammed. Is that no? Well, it can't be Friday, right? Because today's Wednesday. But anyway, good to have you here, Mohammed. I'm not sure what you're trying to say there, but hey, good to have you here, my friend. Thanks so much for your comment. So for those of you tuning in for the first time, again, welcome. If you're one of my new connections or you just recently started following me. So again, every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, I'm going to be broadcasting on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and I'm going to be sharing various job search related topics, strategies, advice, tips to help all of you folks in your job search, right? Practical, pragmatic stuff based on my 8+ years working in the staffing industry as a recruiter, recruiting on a variety of different industries, and a variety of different types of organizations, ranging from startups to large size multinational companies, both public sector, private sector, and anything in between, if such a thing exists. All right. So, hey, good to have you here. And again, this is definitely a session you want to be taking notes, folks. And make sure you hit me up with a like, and feel free to share this stream with your network as well. Pretty sure this is going to benefit some of the job seekers you might be connected to that are in your network as well. All right. So 8 tips, folks. 8 tips how you can put yourself in a position to really create a great impression when you're on that initial pre-screening video conversation with recruiters, right? With recruiters, whether it's staffing agency recruiters or corporate recruiters. Right now, tip number one, and this kind of lays the foundation for things. Like, you have to understand, folks, what is the purpose of this conversation, right? The purpose. What is the purpose of this conversation? Not just from your perspective, but from the recruiter's perspective as well, right? So as someone who has worked in recruitment, I'm definitely going to be sharing the recruiter's perspective. But I want you to, I don't want you to underestimate the importance of this conversation, right? Again, some job seekers out there, and maybe some of you tuning in might be feeling like, yeah, you know what, Dean, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just it's just a video conversation with a recruiter. They don't know anything about the field. They're just reading off a whole bunch of questions and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And yeah, maybe that's the case, folks, right? Maybe you're dealing with a junior recruiter, someone very new to the industry they're recruiting in. Maybe they don't know, what's going on and all that stuff. Yeah, that could very well, be the situation, right? But that being said, I don't want you to underestimate the importance of this conversation. The pre-screen, okay? We're talking about the pre-screen, the initial interview with the recruiter, right? Again, could be staffing agency, could be corporate recruiter. This is the conversation that will determine, folks, okay? And if you're taking notes, you want to definitely write this down. This is the conversation that's going to determine if there will be another conversation, all right? So regardless of your thoughts and your views about recruiters, how recruiters are inefficient and, whatever that stuff is, and maybe some of that stuff is true, regardless of all that, remember, this is the conversation that will determine whether further conversations will take place, all right? So that's how I want you to start thinking about the pre-screen. Now, from the recruiter standpoint, what the recruiter is trying to do is determine, and by the way, always remember that you're probably not the only person the recruiter is speaking to, all right? Especially if this is for a specific position, a specific opportunity for their client, or if it's a corporate recruiter for their organization. You are maybe one of, I'd say 15 to 20, maybe even more candidates that they're going to be having this pre-screen conversation with, all right? So what the recruiter wants to do on this pre-screen is determined, because folks, they're not going to present all 15 to 20 people that they're going to be speaking to, all right? Like, let's not sugarcoat things here, right? They're going to make 15 to 20 phone calls, maybe to candidates they've shortlisted for this position, whatever this position is. And of that 15 to 20 conversations, and by the way, they're not going to reach all 15 to 20 of those people, right? Some of the time it's going to go to voicemails. Other times there's going to be people who says, I'm not interested in all that stuff. Anyway, considering all that stuff, they're not going to present all 15 to 20 of the people that they're going to be having a conversation with. They're going to conduct this pre-screen to help them determine, hey, of these 15, 20 people that I'm speaking to, who are the 4 or 5 that I'm going to present to the hiring team, right? That is what the recruiter is trying to accomplish on this pre-screen, right? And we're talking about pre-screen video conversations today, or initial video interviews with recruiters. That is what the recruiter is trying to accomplish, folks. That is the recruiter's goal from the recruiter's standpoint. It's not for you to be buddy and chummy and talk about sports and the weather and all that stuff. Yeah, there's going to be some small talk maybe depending on who you're speaking with. But make no mistake, folks, the recruiter has a strategic objective they're trying to reach through this pre-screen. And no matter how friendly and chummy and professional they are, always remember this. Never lose sight of this. The recruiter is determining whether you are going to be one of those 4 or 5 people that they're going to, further shortlist and actually present to the hiring team. So take this conversation very, very seriously, like in terms of preparation. And we're going to get to the preparation stuff shortly. But you definitely want to make sure that you're paying a lot of attention to this conversation, and you're taking the preparation steps as well. So we got Elham in the house. Elham, always good to have you here. Thanks so much. And folks, feel free to put in your questions and share your thoughts in the comments as well. I'm going to be responding to questions as we go along, on this topic as well. All right. But what's the key here, right? So tip number 1, understand the gravity and the importance of this conversation. Do not underestimate the importance of this conversation. The recruiter has an end goal. Okay, they're not just randomly reaching out to you, especially if it's for a specific position that they're recruiting on. They're trying to determine, hey, is this person someone that I'm gonna, further shortlist and actually present to the hiring team, or is this someone, who's not going to be the right fit for this position? They're looking to have 15 to 20 conversations and narrow it down to the 4 or 5 people that they want to present for the opportunity. All right. So always remember this. This is the basis for this conversation from the recruiter's standpoint. Now, tip number 2. Now you're on the video conversation, you're on the video call, you're on the pre-screen, the pre-screen video call with the recruiter. One of the first things you got to figure out, folks, as a job seeker, as a potential candidate, is as soon as possible, you need to figure out why they want to speak with you in the first place, right? Now, there's 2 scenarios here, right, from the recruiter's perspective. Scenario number 1 is they're recruiting on an active current position, and they feel like you might be a good potential fit. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two is, and this is most of the time with staffing agencies, they might not have something for you right now, but they see you as a great potential fit for anticipated positions, right? In the near term or immediate term, or even in the long term future, that they anticipate from their clients. Right now, as an example for this, let's say I'm a recruiter at a staffing agency, and our agency, we have a lot of data analyst opportunities, right? We usually get a lot of data analyst opportunities. We don't have anything right now, but I wanted to set up a conversation with you because I know that even though I'm not recruiting for data analyst positions right now, I'm anticipating such opportunities in the near future, and I want to make sure I build a relationship with you, and that I'm able to present you when something does come up in the near future. So that might be the scenario, right? But most of the time, if you have a pre-screen schedule, if it's a video interview, and if it's a pre-screen video interview, usually it's scenario number one, which is it's for a specific position, right? Now you need to know why they wanted to get on a conversation with you, right? Now I covered this on a previous live stream. I think it was from like 2 weeks ago or something. So look, make sure you check that segment out as well, folks. You should be able to find it on my YouTube channel. But I covered this in a bit more detail. But an important question you need to ask as early on in the conversation with the recruiter is, and this is, after the introductions, after the, little bit of chit chat and warm up in this pre-screen video call, you definitely want to take the time, folks, to ask the recruiter, hey, Mr. Mrs. Recruiter, glad to meet you. Appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. And before we get started, I just wanted to, out of curiosity, I wanted to find out what caught your attention about my resume, and what made you want to schedule this conversation. So that's a very important question you want to ask, folks, because that's going to kind of set the stage in terms of what caught the recruiter's attention about your profile, your resume, your experience, and secondly, what their intention is, what why they wanted to set up the conversation, if that's not clear at this point. So by asking that question, you're going to find out what the recruiter liked about your profile. This is the most important thing, because this is what's going to set the stage for the remainder of the conversations in terms of you knowing which projects you want to highlight from your past or recent professional experience, right? And especially for those of you folks tuning in, you're a senior professional, you have so many projects, right? Like you got so much under your belt, and you might be thinking, Dean, one of my biggest problems is I don't know which projects I want to talk about. Like, how do I know? So asking this question, folks, and it's a very simple question, as early on in the conversation as possible, will help you determine which projects you want to focus on for the remainder of the conversation with the recruiter as you're talking about your background, right? So I'll just do a quick example of this, right? So let's say I'm a let's say I'm a data analyst, right? All right, and I'm on the video pre-screen right now with the recruiter, and we do the chit chat, the small talk, and all that warm up stuff, and then I'm like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I really appreciate your time. It's a pleasure to meet with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. Now, before we begin, out of curiosity, I wanted to find out, what caught your attention about my resume, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, and why did you feel like you wanted to schedule this conversation with me, right? See, I'm not asking it in a rude way. I'm not being unprofessional, right? It's just a common sense kind of a question, right? So then the recruiter might say, well, Dean, it's great meeting you as well, and appreciate your time as well. Well, what really caught my eye about your resume is actually your data analyst work when you were working in the e-commerce industry, right? I noticed you've been in the e-commerce industry for 2 to 3 years, and that's really what caught my attention, because that's what my client's looking for if it's for a current position, right? So anyway, what does this do for me as a candidate? Now I know what exactly caught the attention of the recruiter, because guess what? For the remainder of the conversation, folks, you want to give the most attention to what's relevant to the recruiter. So just by the recruiter telling me that that's what caught their attention, I can make a few assumptions. Number one, that whoever their client is, right, because they might not disclose that to me right now if it's a staffing agency, or if it's a corporate recruiter, if it's at their company, obviously they have some kind of e-commerce related projects going on. That's what I can assume as a potential candidate right now, right? Because you got to be doing constant calculations, folks, right, throughout the interview. So what that tells me is, hey, for the remainder of my conversation now, I want to put especially a lot of focus on my e-commerce projects that I completed as a data analyst, right? That's what I want to give the most attention to. That priority number one is that. And yeah, that does not mean ignore your other standout, huge accomplishments. But my point here is asking this question will allow you to determine that you want to pay especially a lot of focus and attention to your e-commerce projects that you did as a data analyst. And then second priority, of course, is any other standout projects you've done, right? So this is why you want to find out as soon as possible by asking this question, right? So that was tip number two. You want to make sure you do that for sure. We got my friend Sneha in the house. Sneha, always good to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, tip number 3, and again, because this is the video interview, folks. You gotta dress to impress, right? Now, how you dress could be influenced by who the organization is, right? For example, if this is a conversation with a corporate recruiter and it's for their organization that they work for, you probably want to do some research on their organization, right? So I know some of you are thinking, well, Dean, what's the point? Right now it's COVID-19, it's the pandemic, everyone's working from home. Does it really matter? Yes, it still matters, folks. You still want to make a great impression, right? So if it's a corporate recruiter, if your video pre-screen is with a corporate recruiter, you want to research the organization, and I'm going to get to the research part shortly, but you want to research a bit about what the dress code is, what the company culture is like at the organization, and you want to dress accordingly at your video interview, right? Because you want the recruiter to visualize, and again, this is the great thing about video conversations is the recruiter can see you. And if you're going to be, considered as a potential employee, because at some point this pandemic thing is going to come to an end, and they're gonna need to visualize you in their offices, right? As someone in the office. So you want to present yourself as someone that they can actually literally visualize as being in the office and fitting their company culture, whatever it is. So do some research, and my suggestion is take it at one notch, right? If it's a business casual environment, maybe you want to consider dressing up to a business professional type of a standard, right, in your dress code. If it's a casual environment, maybe don't show up with your not dressed appropriately and stuff like that. But maybe take it up a notch, just whatever you're wearing, whatever the company culture is, just make sure, folks, you're showing up looking sharp, professional, and basically presenting yourself as someone who is very interested for this opportunity and very eager to be considered for the opportunity, right? So my friend Sneha here, Sneha says, how you dress matters for the pre-screen. Absolutely, folks. By the way, Sneha is one of my former colleagues from my time at Robert Half. And she's currently a corporate recruiter as well, right? So this is not someone just randomly saying this to make you feel good, folks, or trying to pump you up or something. Like this is the reality of the situation, right? Sneha has a recruiter as well. She's currently working in corporate recruitment. Hey, how you present yourself matters, right? So this is coming from someone else who is in recruitment at the moment, right? How you dress does matters, folks, for the pre-screen, right? And even if it's a staffing agency, right? Don't think that, oh yeah, you know what, Dean, it's my pre-screen is with a staffing agency. It's not going to really matter. Nah, it's just with a staffing agency. No, folks, do not make that mistake. Do not assume just because your video pre-screen, your video conversation with a staffing agency, just because it's with a staffing agency, don't think the staffing agency is not also evaluating you. Because guess what? The staffing agency wants to look good in the eyes of their client, right? So if you show up disorganized and you don't look presentable, you show up looking whatever, like in a way that doesn't show that you were putting in the effort to create a good impression, then the agency might not want to move you forward for any of their clients, right? Or even for the specific role that you're being considered for on behalf of that the agency is considering you for on the behalf of their client, right? So you got to make sure. And again, folks, the dress code could depend on the organization. Like if it's a startup, maybe dressing in a suit and tie might be a bit of an overkill, but business casual should be fine even for that situation, right? So as my friend Sneha here says, please research about the company and know what their products and services are, because they may ask you. Yeah, this is a great point, Sneha. Glad you brought that up. I'm actually going to speak about that in one of the next few points. So that's also very, very important. We got my friend Mehul here. Mehul says, I have an interview scheduled this week. What would be an ideal attire? Does a shirt and tie look good? Yeah, Mehul. So again, Mehul, going back to what I mentioned before, do some research on the organization, right? So what is the culture? What is the dress code at this company? You want to make sure you're dressing to something that at least matches that level. All right. So if the company culture, if it's a shirt and tie environment, if it's a business professional environment, then you got to make sure you're dressing up to that level, Mehul, right? Now, if it's a startup, right? If it's a t-shirt and jeans environment, if it's a startup, if that's their company culture, then maybe you don't want to dress a shirt, a shirt and tie, because then what you don't want to happen, Mehul, is if it's a startup, you don't want them to think, oh, this guy looks like he's a little too professional for our environment and stuff like that. So this is why, folks, very important to research the company culture and the dress code as well. So dress code should be a part of that research as well, right? So Mehul, yeah, if it's a shirt and tie environment, absolutely, definitely make sure you dress in a shirt and tie, Mehul. You're looking sharp, you're looking professional, you're showing that interest in being considered for the opportunity. All right. So great question there, Mehul. Hope that helps. So again, folks, dress to impress, right? And this does involve some research. You got to research the organization. Now, if it's with a staffing agency, you might be wondering, well, Dean, what if it's with a staffing agency and they have multiple opportunities? Like, what do I dress? Staffing agency folks, as a best practice, I would suggest, dress up as much as possible, right? Suit and tie. If you don't want to do suit and tie, at the very least, business casual, right? So dress shirt or some kind of a dress shirt and all that stuff. And make sure you're showing up again, looking to put your best foot forward, and you're looking to again create that impression that, hey, this is me, and I'm someone that you Mr. Mrs. Staffing Agency recruiter can feel comfortable presenting to your clients, right? Now obviously, depending on a specific position the staffing agency wants to present you for, they might say, hey, you know what, this client is a startup, so you don't have to go in dressed in a suit and tie and all that stuff. Or they might say, hey, this client is a business professional environment, so you want to be dressed in business professional attire for the conversation. They're going to guide you on that. But my point here is, if your initial conversation is with the staffing agency in general, it's kind of an exploratory conversation. You want to make sure you're dressed up, to the nines, folks, like business professional. That's what I would recommend, all right, for the conversation. So that was tip number 3, dress to impress. You got to do your research on the dress code and all that stuff. You got to make sure you're doing your research, especially if it's for a specific conversation with a recruiter, corporate recruiter at an organization, all right? So next tip, right, I'm moving on. I do see some questions here. I'm going to get to the questions shortly. Next tip number 4, be punctual, folks. You gotta be punctual, right? Don't think that, hey, it's just a recruiter, they're gonna understand, they're gonna take it lightly. No. What the recruiter is thinking is, hey, if this person is not even punctual with me, how am I gonna feel comfortable presenting them to the hiring team? And what if they're not punctual with them? So be punctual, folks. And yes, I know there's recruiters out there not showing up for their video calls and for their phone calls, and they're not being punctual themselves. Totally understand that. And you know what? That's unprofessional on the part of the recruiter, especially if they don't apologize and they don't reschedule or let you know up front that they're going to be late. Definitely agree with you on that, folks. But we're talking about you today, all right? I'm talking about you today. I don't want you to be you to not be punctual. You need to be punctual. You need to be on time. And especially if it's a video interview, folks, you do not want to be setting up your technical setup like 5 minutes before the video interview. Your technical environment needs to be set up. The camera, mics, speakers, sound, lighting, okay, all that stuff. It needs to be set up well before the interview. And you want to test out whatever software is being used for the video conference, all right? If it's Zoom or Cisco WebEx or whatever platform you're using, make sure your computer or your device is compatible with that stuff, all right? So be punctual. You got to be punctual. And before the interview, I would suggest maybe a day in advance. You might want to even reach out to your recruiter contact and just reconfirm the conversation, right? It could be as simple as, hey, Mr. Recruiter, just wanted to reconfirm, our conversation for tomorrow at, whatever time. And just to let you know, I'm all set, I'm ready, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. That's it. It could be as simple as that. So if you want to reconfirm it, make sure you do that. And always reconfirm the details for the conversation as well, right? Like the links and, is it the right link? If you're in a location that's going back to physical on-site interviews, you want to reconfirm the address and all that stuff. Make sure you do that. And if it's a physical location you're traveling to, always consider traffic conditions, construction issues along the way, right? On your commute, leave enough time. So you got to make sure you're there for the actual interview itself. 10 minutes early, right? You check in 10 minutes early, and then whenever the interviewer is ready, they'll be ready to interview you, hopefully on time. All right. So again, be punctual, folks. Very important. We got a question here from Suhas. Suhas, good to have you here. Shout out to Suhas. Thanks so much for tuning in. Suhas says, hi, Dean, how are you? How important is it to use the jargons while answering the questions? A smiling face is good, or does it put up a wrong statement? All right. So first part of your question, Suhas, in terms of how important is it to use jargon while answering the questions. Now today, Suhas, we're talking about recruiters, right? Now, if you get too much into the industry slang and jargon and stuff like that, the recruiter is not going to understand, and they're not going to admit that they don't understand either. So if you're speaking with a recruiter, folks, and this goes to you, Suhas, and anyone else out there, look, folks, If your conversation is with a recruiter, yeah, maybe if it's a senior recruiter, they'll understand the jargon and all those fancy terms you're using. But I would rather you go in and explain things in a very easy to understand manner to the recruiter. All right, always assume the recruiter might not be as technically in depth and knowledgeable about your industry and your what your field is, because I'd rather you explain things in a very easy to understand manner to the recruiter versus them not understanding anything you're saying, because you're throwing a whole bunch of jargon, fancy terms, you're using all these industry related jargon, and the recruiter doesn't want to look stupid, so they're not going to say, hey Suhas, can you I'm not sure what you mean by that, I'm not sure I understand that. They might not do that, folks, right? Me personally, I have no problem doing that. Like, I let people know, hey, you mentioned that word, what does that mean? I'm not familiar with that term, I'm not familiar with that word. But not all recruiters are going to do that, folks. All right. And I'm not here to talk about right or wrong in regards to that, but it is what it is, right? So my suggestion, Suhas, if the conversation is with a recruiter, explain things in a very easy to understand manner, and don't throw too much jargon and terms and stuff that someone outside of your field might not be familiar with. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now, second part of the question is, a smiling face, is it good or does it put up the wrong statement? Yeah. So Suhas, you definitely want to be smiling, but it's gotta be natural, right? Like if you're smiling the entire time, like you're just like, like that the whole time, then it's kind of weird, right? Because it's just like, the recruiter's going to be like, okay, what's wrong with this person, right? What's wrong with Dean? He's got that smile the whole thing. Is it like, does he got one of those Zoom filters on or something like that, right? So it's got to be natural. But yeah, you want to be smiling. You definitely want to be smiling. Because again, smiling is contagious, folks, right? I can't remember where I read this, but apparently when you smile, it actually maybe not forces people, but it encourages the other person to smile as well, right? And try this out. You're walking. Well, I guess now we can, because most of us are wearing the face mask. But as an exercise, hey, maybe you have a video conversation with someone. If you smile, chances are they're going to smile back, right? So smiling is contagious, but it has to be genuine and it has to be natural, right? If you're just forcing yourself to smile for the whole conversation, and you're like, like that for the whole conversation, and then, you're trying to keep it and, stick it out there, that might be kind of strange, right? So make sure it's genuine. But yeah, I definitely encourage everyone smiles in their video pre-screens and video conversations with recruiters, folks. All right. So great question there, Suhas. Thanks for sharing that. Now, next point, folks. All right. Tip number 5, and I think yeah, I answered Suhas's question. So tip number 5, and I'm going to get to the rest of the questions there in the comments. So keep the questions coming, folks. Feel free to keep the questions coming, and feel free to share your own thoughts as well. All right. So tip number 5, folks. All right. Be prepared to speak about your professional experience, and be prepared to be the expert on your resume. All right. A lot of you folks, well, not a lot of you folks, maybe I might be exaggerating there, but quite a few job seekers out there I've spoken to, or that I've experienced as a recruiter, are putting way too much, hope and faith on their resume, right? And the attitude is like, hey, it's all on my resume. There you go. Read over the resume. Let me know if you have any questions. No, folks, that's the wrong attitude to have. Your resume is simply a tool of reference. It's a marketing tool. It's there to get interest, generate interest, and generate attention from recruiters, right? We're talking about recruiters today, all right? So I'm only going to be talking about recruiters, but the point of your resume is for the recruiter to, read over it, glance over it, whatever, and get their attention and make them want to pick up the phone and give you a phone call. But the recruiter wants to speak with you, folks. All right. They want to speak with you. They don't want to speak to the piece of paper, right? The resume is just in front of them as a point of reference at that point, right? They're going to refer to things on your resume, but you're going to have to be the person to expand, elaborate on, and explain the things that are listed on your resume. Okay. So I don't want any of you folks tuning in here to ever say to the recruiter, oh, it's on my resume. No, do never say that, folks. Never say that to any recruiter. It's like a major, what's that term? Pet peeve, right? It's a major pet peeve for recruiters when candidates say it's on my resume. Yeah, I know it's on your resume. That's why I'm asking you about it. I want you to explain what's on your resume, right? It's not my job to go through everything on your resume and formulate my own conclusions about what's listed on your resume. You got to explain things, folks, right? So you need to be. So my point here is you got to be the expert on your resume. If there is each and every bullet point on your resume, you need to be able to expand, elaborate on, and further explain and define what's listed on your resume. If there is one bullet point on your resume that you don't understand, you don't know, you can't remember, then you might as well not list it at all. because you never know what might capture the attention of the recruiter, right? Especially if it's something related to a specific type of industry, right? Let's say they're interested in your e-commerce experience, right? You got some e-commerce experience from this year, but you also have e-commerce experience from some project you did like 7 years back, and they're gonna notice that, and they're gonna ask you about that project, and you're gonna be like, oh, that was 7 years ago, I don't remember anything. No, folks, you need to be the expert on your resume. All right, so you need to refresh yourself and familiarize yourself with all that relevant stuff on your resume, especially the relevant stuff, but basically anything listed on your resume, because you do not want to waste precious minutes on the interview, on this conversation, on this video conversation, trying to remember things, and you're like, it was a long time ago, I can't remember that. Oh, I think this. Like, I have experienced that, folks. As a recruiter, I have experienced that, where I ask candidates about some really awesome, really cool project I noticed on their resume, and they can't remember it, right? And this especially happens with you senior level folks out there, right? Because you have so much, a wealth of knowledge and expertise and projects under your belt. And sometimes you can't just remember everything. It's just not realistic, right? So what you got to do, you got to make sure before your conversations, you are ready to talk about your experience on the fly, right? And especially the relevant stuff, and be able to, talk about that stuff, right? Now, I'm not saying you need to know each and every, little detail and nook and cranny about every piece of project you've done, but you should be able to easily remember what you did and what the problem was you were resolving and what the outcomes were and all that stuff, right? So that's tip number 5. You got to be prepared to speak about your professional experience, folks. I do not want to hear anyone say it's on my resume. Yeah, it's on your resume. That's why we have your resume in front of us. It's up to you to further elaborate. This is a selling opportunity, folks. This is a selling opportunity. When a recruiter says, hey, I noticed you did XYZ at this company. Can you tell me more about that? This is an opportunity. The recruiter is basically providing you with an opportunity to take control over their perception of you. This is an opportunity for you to sell them on that bullet point, whatever that bullet point was that they're asking you about, right? I mean, what a great opportunity is that, right? For you to influence their perception, right? This is your opportunity to do that. So don't leave that to chance. Do not ever say it's on my resume. You do not want to depend on your resume. Your resume is going to get you the phone call, folks. It's going to get you the phone call. It's going to get you the pre-screen. It's not going to get you the job. Always remember that. If you're taking notes, you want to write that down. A great resume is going to get me a phone call or a pre-screen, but it's not going to get me the job. Getting the job is up to me. All right, make sure you write that down. So that was tip number 5. Be prepared to speak about yourself. You are the professional. You are the expert on your resume. You are the expert in your field, in your domain. You need to be prepared to sell yourself, folks. All right. So we got a question here from Chirag. Chirag says, hello, Dean. Could you please share your thoughts about behavioral questions? I'm happy to, Chirag. Like, do you have any specific inquiry you have about behavioral questions? Feel free to elaborate, because I'm not sure exactly what you want to know about my thoughts about behavioral questions, right? One thing I will say about behavioral questions is, depending on the question, it might give a clue as to what's happening within the organization, right? So folks, for that matter, I just want to quickly touch on something, right? Any interview question you're being asked, whether it's technical or behavioral, always see if the question itself gives a clue as to the pain points the organization is experiencing, right? I'll say that again, because this is very important for your interviews. This is like a strategic kind of a thing, right? The question being asked in and of itself is a clue, could be a clue as to the pain points the organization is experiencing, all right? So, for example, if they ask you for example, Chirag, let's say they ask you, well, how do you deal with difficult stakeholders? Now, what does that tell me? What is the clue here? What that tells me is they are probably experiencing some issues right now with difficult stakeholders. So that's why they're asking you about how you handle difficult stakeholders. So I'm not sure if you had any specific question about behavioral questions, folks, but hey, that's my advice right there, right? Whether behavioral or technical questions, always see if the question itself gives a clue as to the pain points or the problems the organization is experiencing. Always look into that, folks, right? Make sure you check that out. So my friend Sneha says, please check the technology being used for the video pre-screen. Make sure it works on your side and you have no difficulty at the time that you. Yeah, folks, Sneha, I'm glad you shared this because this is such great advice. Folks, I have unfortunately seen candidates get turned down by my clients. When I was in the staffing industry and working as a recruiter, simply because the candidate was not prepared with the technical setup, right? And the feedback I got from the client was, hey, Dean, this candidate didn't seem like they they were well prepared and set up, and it seems like they're not really showing a high level of interest in this opportunity, so we're going to pass on them. You do not want to have that happen, folks. All right, so just like Sneha is saying here, you got to have your technical setup like all done well in advance of the interview, right? And don't just think about the hardware stuff, right? Like camera and your what is it, camera, mic, speakers, sound, all that stuff. Yeah, that stuff is important, but also the software, folks. A lot of people forget about the software compatibility stuff as well. Now, quick tip in regards to the software aspects, I have noticed, and feel free to share in the comments if you've experienced this as well, folks. Right? I've noticed that for those of you using Zoom or WebEx and what all these other video conferencing software, those of you using the web-based version might experience more audio video lags versus you downloading the client, right? So you got to make sure so I would recommend, folks, download the Zoom client, download the WebEx client. Do not use the web-based version, because what I've noticed is that the web-based version can result in audio video lags, and you do not want that to happen and affect the flow of the conversation, right? Especially when you have good rapport, good flow of the conversation. I mean, the lags, yeah, you can't do much about the lags and all that stuff, but I mean, it ruins the whole flow of the conversation. You know what I mean? So as much as possible, I recommend downloading the client so you can have a smooth conversation. All right. So a great point there, Sneha. You gotta have it, folks. You gotta have the technical setup all ready and set and ready to go. All right. Umair, my friend Umair, good to have you here, Umair. Thanks so much. Umair says, "Hi, Dean, very insightful." Hey, I appreciate that, Umair. Glad to see you're getting value out of it. All right, so tip number six, folks. All right, now this is something many recruiters will complain about, right? If not publicly, amongst ourselves, right? This is now I'm giving you some insight into some recruiter talk. All right, what recruiters talk about themselves amongst themselves. And that is, do not interrupt, consistently and constantly interrupt the recruiter as they're asking their question, right? Listen to the complete question before you start responding. A lot of you folks, and a lot of you are not doing this intentionally, all right? It's because you're passionate about what you do. You're passionate about your field. You're excited, and the recruiter starts asking you a question, and you cut them off and you start responding to the question right away. Don't do that, folks, all right? It's annoying. And the other thing is, it might be a multi-component question. There might be multiple parts of the question. So, and this, by the way, applies not just to recruiters. It applies at your interviews with hiring managers as well. Listen to the complete question before you start responding. Do not interrupt, right? It's very annoying. This is another pet peeve of recruiters. Do not interrupt the recruiter. Always wait until the complete question is finished. They've completed asking the question. Give it maybe a 1 to 2 second pause. Then you start responding to the question, all right? Just in case there's multiple parts they want to add. So you do not want to, especially, hey folks, if it happens once or twice, hey, it's no big deal. It happens, right? But if it's something you're constantly doing, you're constantly interrupting, you're not letting them finish speaking, you're interrupting them, you're cutting them off when they're asking the question, it's just annoying, folks. And you know what? It's rude, it's impolite, it's unprofessional. And it's just really annoying. And the recruiter, guess what the recruiter is going to be thinking? Guess what the recruiter is going to be thinking, folks? Hey, I'm going to present this person to the hiring team. The hiring team is going to meet with them, and they're going to do this exact same thing with the hiring team. And that's going to make me look bad as a recruiter, right? Because that's what the recruiter's other concern is. Hey, you're gonna meet with the hiring team. You're gonna keep interrupting them as well, and you don't want that to happen, right? So look, maybe you're not doing this intentionally, folks. Hey, it's completely fine. Everyone makes that mistake of occasionally interrupting because they got excited and stuff like that. So once or twice, not a big deal. But if you're doing it consistently, constantly, continuously, that's when it's going to be a problem. So again, listen to the complete question. Give it a 1 to 2 second pause. Then you start responding. All right. So that's another tip for you folks. Now, I think we have another. So Chirag says, because I have an interview and don't know what they're going to ask. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of behavioral question, Chirag, I've kind of already covered it. Right? I mean, it depends on the organization, and maybe you can do some research on Google and stuff like that. But what you want to avoid, folks, a lot of you folks are Googling, these interview responses and thinking that, hey, that's fine and all that stuff. But it's not a good practice, because then you're going to sound very robotic, like you're just reciting something you saw on the internet. So the behavioral questions is just to see how you would react in certain scenarios, certain situations. And the other part of Chirag, as I mentioned before, is, hey, behavioral questions, technical questions, whatever they're asking, usually do, not always, but usually give a clue as to the pain points the organization itself is experiencing. So when you're responding, always see if it's giving you a clue as to what the organization is experiencing. So it's great because then you're getting data and you're providing your response as well, right? Chirag says, thanks. Hey, no worries, Chirag. And then tip number 7, folks, and this relates to the technical setup, but have good lighting. I can't tell you how many times as a recruiter I've had a video conversation with someone and it's like they're in the dark, right? This is not like it's not Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, folks, right? You got to have good lighting. Make sure, see, I got this lighting thing in front of me. You got to make sure there's good lighting in front of you so the recruiter can actually see you, right? And a lot of people make the mistake of having the lighting behind them. The lighting should not be behind you. The lighting has to be in front of you, right? You should be facing the light so they can actually see you. So lighting is tip number 7. Make sure you're doing that. We got a question here from Ashna. So Ashna says, hi, Dean. When recruiter asks at the end, is there any question for me? What must be the best answer to give? So again, folks, look, there's no best answer, so to speak, Ashna, right? This depends on the context of the conversation, right? If it's regarding a particular opportunity if it's a staffing agency and the opportunities with their client, then hey, ask them some questions about their client, right? If it's for a corporate recruiter for the company, you should have researched the company in advance and prepared some questions to ask the recruiter about the company, all right? So this is where you got to do your own due diligence and you got to do your research and then formulate your own questions at the end, folks, right? You always want to show that interest because asking questions not only allows you to gather more information, but it also allows you to show that interest, show that interest and enthusiasm for the opportunity, all right? So it's very important that you formulate your own questions. So there's no best question here, and it's not about giving the best answer here, Ashna, right? It's about formulating questions that are relevant to the company, to the organization, to the client if it's for a staffing agency, and to the conversation as well, right? So you got to make sure you're doing that. So hope that helps, Ashna. Great question there. All right, so final point, folks. Final tip number 8, always confirm the next steps, all right? Whether it's a staffing agency, whether it's a corporate recruiter, always confirm the next steps. So this could be as simple as you saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking the time to share more details about the opportunity. Now, given what you learned about myself, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, and given what your client is looking for, or what your organization is looking for, what are the next steps at this point? Do you find that I'm a good potential fit for this opportunity? Or what are the next steps? Now, this could depend on how the recruiter ends the call. Like the recruiter might actually let you know, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for the opportunity, and I'm going to email you shortly more details about this and that. Or the recruiter might say, hey, I need you to make these changes on your resume and blah 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 and all that stuff. So whatever the case, folks, you need to confirm the next steps. And again, this could depend on the context. It could depend on what the recruiter tells you, right? Most of the times, if it's a staffing agency, they want to present you to their client. They're going to let you know to make some adjustments or highlight certain things on your resume. So the next step would be for you to make those changes on your resume and get that into them as soon as possible, right? So whatever the case is, you have to confirm the next steps. So you're well aware of what's going to happen beyond this point, right? And if that has not been established, you should initiate that conversation and ask the recruiter, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, what are the next steps beyond this point? And what else do you need from me at my end so I can help you expedite things and get me in front of your client or get me in front of the hiring team? Because it could be as simple as that, right? So tip number 8, folks, you got to confirm the next steps. So you know what to expect next, and you know how you can further move yourself along in the process, all right? So that's tip number 8. So those are the 8 tips, folks, all right? So let me review those tips again, and I'm going to answer, the remaining questions here. So tip number 1 was you got to understand the purpose of the pre-screen video call, right? Or the video interview you have with the recruiter. Understand the purpose. The purpose is this is what the recruiter is going to use to determine if they want to move you further along in the process. You always got to remember that. Tip number 2 is know why they want to speak with you. Was it something about your industry experience? Was it a specific tool or technology you're aware of? You need to figure that out so you know what to highlight for the remainder of the conversation. Tip number 3, dress to impress. Do your research. Understand what the corporate culture is like. If it's with a corporate recruiter, you gotta dress up to that level, whatever their culture is. If it's a staffing agency, hey, I would suggest dress up, suit and tie, or at the very least business casual for the video conversation. Tip number 4, be punctual. Reconfirm the time and date and the platform, the software for the conversation. Make sure you do that. Tip number 5, be prepared to speak about your professional experience. You are the expert on your resume. Do not depend on your resume. You need to be able to expand on and elaborate on each and every bullet point you have listed on the resume. That's tip number 5. Tip number 6, listen to the complete question before you start responding. Do not interrupt. Do not cut off the recruiter, especially continuously. It's annoying, it's unprofessional, and guess what? The recruiter is going to be thinking, hey, they're going to do the same thing with the hiring team, so I don't feel comfortable presenting this person for the role. All right, tip number 7, have good lighting. The lighting has to be in front of you so they can actually see you, right? So you got to be able to do that. And tip number 8, always confirm the next steps of the process and what they need from your end to expedite the process and move you further along in the process. All right. So those are the 8 tips, folks. Hope that helps. I'm going to get to the questions shortly. Now, just a quick heads up for those of you who found this session helpful. Hey, make sure you give me a like and make sure you share this session, folks. Appreciate that. For those of you folks who want a sample of, I have a free sample script on my website on how you should be running recruiters through your resume. Make sure you check it out. It's on my website, dkglobaltalent.com. Again, it's a free sample script on how to run recruiters through your resume, dkglobaltalent.com, dkglobaltalent.com. Check it out at dkglobaltalent.com. So make sure you check it out, folks. Hope that helps. For those of you who have conversations set up with recruiters, there is a certain flow I recommend you should use when running recruiters through your resume, position by position, right? Because most of the time, that's what, especially staffing agencies, they're going to have you run them through your resume, position by position. All right. So make sure you grab that and download that. Now, other thing is, for those of you, if you're a job seeker, you're applying for jobs online, you're applying, you're not getting responses from hiring teams. If that's your number one challenge right now, I want you to take advantage of signing up for my new course, Applying to Jobs Online 101, the 3-step process to getting responses from hiring teams. Right now, you can get it at special pricing, folks, $87.77 Canadian. The prices are going up on Monday, so I'm giving you a heads up. You can pretty much complete this course within 3 to 4 hours total completion time. It's a mix of pre-recorded video and reading material as well, which I've put together. And it runs you through the 3-step process you need to be utilizing in your job search when you're applying for job opportunities out there, right? Now, I'm also throwing in additional support. You get access to a private Facebook group community where you can post your questions and I will respond to your questions throughout the week. And this is the best, but the most exciting part is, and I'm throwing in a weekly group Zoom call where I will be personally there present to guide you through whatever questions you have about the course, whatever questions you have about implementing and executing on the information. And also any questions you have that you want to ask me, on a weekly basis, you get access to this Zoom call where we meet as a group and you'll be able to ask me all of your questions directly, live, face to face, just like this, on the weekly group Zoom call. So I'm including that right now. As the course gains popularity, I'm not sure if I can sustain that realistically, but right now it's great because it's a great intimate kind of a thing, because it's a group of us that are able to have a great conversations, and for me to respond to your questions about the course, your questions about whatever job search related stuff you're going through, and where I can hold you accountable and make sure you're understanding and implementing on what's taught in the course as best as possible, right? So again, prices are going up on Monday, folks. If you've been on the fence and you want to sign up, now's the time to sign up, all right? So you can get it for $87.77 Canadian. Check it out at dkglobaltalent.com/get interviews, dkglobaltalent.com/get interviews, dkglobaltalent.com/get interviews. Make sure you check it out, folks, all right? So let me check out the questions here. And by the way, folks, make sure, don't forget, I'm going to be doing 3 live streams every week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. I'm going to be right here live, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, right here to help all of you folks out with job search tips and topics. All right. So let me finish the rest of the questions here. So you got a question from my friend Clyden. Clyden, good to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. So Clyden says, hey, Dean, how do you recommend dealing with a question you may not know the answer to? I usually admit I don't know the answer, rather than rambling on. Do you have a specific way to frame a response? All right, so Clayton, so this is a great, so first of all, Clayton, I do agree with your approach, right? You don't want to ramble on and pretend like you know something. And if you don't know the answer to something, you should let them know that you're not, I'm not, sorry, Mr. Recruiter, I'm actually not familiar with XYZ. That is not something I'm familiar with. Now, an additional suggestion, Clayton, now, if they ask you about something you don't have experience with, after you disclose that you don't have experience with that thing, whatever it is, now the second thing, folks, and this is, folks, I hope you folks are taking notes, right? Because I'm showing you some interview strategy right now, right? So tip number two in regards to this, client, is if there's something similar you have experience or knowledge with, then you want to highlight that instead. All right. Now, this might not be applicable to every kind of question you might get asked, but for example, client, let's say they ask you about XYZ, right? XYZ could be anything, whatever it is, right? And you say, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, unfortunately, I don't have experience with XYZ, so I can't really speak about that. Now, the second strategy is, and the second follow-up to this is, explain something you do have experience with that is similar to whatever it is that they asked you about. So you might say, client, in your situation, you might say, yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I don't have experience with XYZ. However, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I do have experience with ABC, which is very similar to XYZ, which is what you're using at your company. And they have such and such similarities. And based on that, yeah, I have utilized ABC, and this is what I've done. This is what I've accomplished. And given the similarities, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter, I can probably implement the same thing at your organization. Given a bit of a ramp up period to pick up on XYZ, which is what you're using at your organization. So yeah, client, that would be my suggestion, right? So number one is, yeah, be honest. If you don't have experience with something, you don't know the answer, folks, you want to be upfront about that. You don't want to make up stuff and ramble on and on. But if it is possible, and this might not be the case for every question because it could depend on the question, but if at all possible, if there's something similar you can showcase that you do have experience with, draw the similarities and then show them how it will be very easy for you to learn whatever it is they asked you about. Then that's even more effective as well. All right. So hope that helps, client. Great question there. Chirag says, hello, Dean. Do you have a list of behavioral questions and answers in PDF or Word documents? I appreciate if you share with me. Yeah, Chirag, go on Google, right? I mean, do a Google search. Like, folks, don't expect people to spoon feed you this stuff, right? If there's nothing on my website, if there's nothing you can get on my website and stuff, hey, then I guess I don't have anything, right? Like, you got to do your research. You got to take the time, go on Google, do some research, right? I'm not picking on you here, Chirag, but a lot of you folks, you're expecting people to spoon feed you stuff, right? And that's not going to work out. So you folks got to knock that off. You got to do the due diligence. Go on Google. There's plenty of resources out there that's going to help you folks with, these behavioral questions and, technical questions, whatever it is. A lot of resources, folks. We are in the age of the internet, right? I mean, so do your due diligence, do your research, go out there and find the stuff that you're looking for, right? So, Roya, we got a question here from Roya. Roya says, hey, Dean, you mentioned we shouldn't be going with web-based Zoom or other platforms and download the client ones. Does downloading the client ones something above and beyond clicking on the link they provide us in their invite? Yeah, so Roya, basically what I mean by this, Roya, is if you click on the Zoom link and it opens up the Zoom application, then that means you probably have Zoom installed on your device or your computer, right? What I'm saying is don't use the web. If there's a web-based version, don't use I would suggest against using the web browser based version, right? Because Zoom and I think WebEx as well, they have a web browser based version, right? Where it's not an application or some client you download onto your machine. And what I find with the web browser version is it results in video lags and audio lags and stuff like that. So if it opens up an application, then it means you're good. It means all's good, Roya. So you shouldn't have any issues with that. But what I'm saying here is don't use the browser-based version, right? Because what I have found in my experience, it results in lags, audio lags, video lags, that kind of mess up the conversation, all right? So hope that helps, Roya. Hope that clarifies. We got David in the house. David says, thanks, Dean. Very helpful. Hey, no worries, David. Good to have you here. Thanks for the feedback. And we got Klein. Klein says, thanks, Dean, for the response. Appreciate it. Hey, no worries, Klein. Good to have you here. All right, folks, so that's it. And hey, I'm back again tomorrow, same time, same bat location. Tomorrow as well, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone on Thursday. So again, folks, my new schedule for live streams, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone here on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Periscope is getting phased out. It's going to be Twitter, only Twitter. So, hey, I'm here, folks. All right. I'm here to help you, here to share my tips and advice to help you folks out in your job search. And see you folks again tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone right here. And I'm going to continue the tips, folks. All right. Hey, keep pushing through, folks. Stay positive. Figure out the right process. Keep implementing, executing on the right process. Keep taking those actions. And you're going to get results. If you're not getting the right results, the problem is not you, folks. The problem is not you lack talent. The problem is not you lack intelligence. The problem is not that you're not an able and capable person. The problem is your strategy, folks. Look at your strategy. All right. Hey, everyone have a wonderful day. See you folks tomorrow.